All right. Mr. McKee,
Yes, ma'am.
you introduce yourself. Tell us your name and your DOC number.
Robertt Mckee, 462602.
All right, Mr. McKee, and you have counsel with you. I'd like to ask her to introduce herself, please.
Yes, ma'am. Jennifer Cameron on behalf of Robertt Mckee.
Thank you. Let me acknowledge the folks that you have there with you in at the state penitentiary. You have your wife, Yolanda. Other family is Erica Knowles, Hardis Knowles, Braylon Knowles, spiritual advisor Ted Higgins, and a friend. Also joining us in the Zoom room, we have the Parole Project, your daughter Marie and Catherine, friend Nikita Bass, Antonia McKee, family member, Tamika, your sister, Natasha Jenkins, the mother of your children, Vicki Dane, and Ebony McLaughlin. And this is who will be speaking on your behalf. We'll have your wife, your sister Tamika, and the Parole Project. We also have joining us in opposition Tommy Sorrell, who will also be speaking in opposition.
Excuse me, Mr. Notza. Mr. Notza,
Yes.
those are not the speakers that we had chosen for the day. It should be his wife, Yolanda, his spiritual advisor, Mr. Ted Higgins, and Vicki Dane, his friend.
Right?
My apologies, ma'am.
So the Miss Yolanda, Ted Higgins, and Vicki Dane. Got it. Okay. At the appropriate time, we'll call on them for their remarks. First, I'm sure your attorney has explained the process, but for everybody participating, let me just explain it again. Mr. McKee, I'll read some identifying information into the record. After which we'll have a parole interview with you. We'll hear from the warden, and then we'll hear from all those folks who just indicated will be speaking. At the very end, you'll be allowed to make a statement, and then we'll turn it over to your attorney for her presentation. Before we go, you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So, Robertt Mckee, you're classified as a third felony offender. You're currently serving a 65-year sentence out of Washington Parish for attempted manslaughter, attempted second-degree kidnapping, aggravated battery, armed robbery, disarming a peace officer, and aggravated escape. Your parole eligibility date is determined to be December 29, 2021. Your good time date is June 26, 2060. Full term is December 26, 2066. Does that information sound correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Your case has been assigned to me, so I'll start the interview process. So, Mr. McKee, how old are you, sir?
49,
And how long have you served so far?
21 years and some months.
So, a little over 21 years of a 65-year sentence.
Yes,
Is that
ma'am.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
Your prior offenses, I did mention you're classified as a third felony offender. I see in the state of Mississippi, robbery, where you got a 15-year sentence, possession of a CDS, you received a 4-year sentence. And then there was another conviction, Washington Parish, aggravated burglary, where you received a 4-year sentence. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I see in November of 2004, there was an arrest for battery of a correctional officer, and that was not crossed in 2006. But can you tell us about why you were arrested?
In the jail, there was a misunderstanding between me and a correctional officer. I was asking about my medication at the time. I was living in the St. Tammany Parish jail and not the Washington Parish jail because of the escape. The warden at that time was Warden Weeks. He came down to ask me what was the problem. I explained to him that I was not getting my medication, and I asked the CO about my medication. It wasn't a problem. I just asked when I was going to be transported, and Warden Weeks hit me and they wrestled me to the ground, and that was the end of the incident. They later booked me in on the charge, but later dropped it once some offenders came forward that witnessed the situation and attested to the fact that I did not hit Warden Weeks at no time.
And we do, as I mentioned, I do see that it was not possible later in 2006. So for the offense that we're here today for, offenses, tell us what happened. What happened?
Well, in order for me to tell you, Ms. Renasa, exactly what happened, I would have to start from the beginning, but I promise I'll be brief. June, at a time where I should have been getting ready for my daughter's 2-year birthday party, I chose to come to Louisiana and try to rob a drug dealer. I failed in that and ended up going to the Washington Parish jail. When I got to the jail, I discovered that the drug dealer that I had tried to rob had family members that worked in the jail and also lived in the jail. From that point forward, I was attacked continuously by family members and friends of the drug dealer that I was trying to rob. This persisted for several months until finally I got a weapon that helped me ward off any attacks that may happen. Also, while the beatings was going on, I was being deprived of my medication for high blood pressure, asthma, and I had to be taken to the hospital several times because of it. In the course of that, I wrote several ARPs, wrote the ACLU, the Inspector General, the secretary at that time was Richard Stalter. I wrote him trying to get some type of help with this situation. On December 28th, I became very sick. I couldn't breathe. I was sweating profusely. I was really in a bad place. I didn't know exactly what was wrong, but I just knew I was sick. So I stayed up all night because the policy was not to transport at night. So we was hoping that the next day someone would take us to the hospital. Mr. Irvin Sanderson, who was the deputy at that time, was alerted of the fact of my condition by my cellie. He came in, saw my condition, tried to get the head jailer at the time to approve him to take me to the hospital because he was the assigned patrol officer, although he wasn't working in that capacity that day. The head jailer refused to allow me to be transported. So Mr. Sanderson said, just hang in there. And so I tried to hang in there. He came and checked on me around 10 o'clock, close to lunchtime, and saw that I had gotten noticeably worse, decided that, okay, he had to call someone above me, above the head jailer. And so he contacted someone. Next thing I know, he called back to the cell block, told me to prepare to be transported to the
You
hospital.
eventually got to the hospital.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. What happened at the hospital?
Okay, once we got to the hospital, it took us 2 hours to get seen. When we finally were seen by the doctor, he gave me 2 breathing treatments, a nitroglycerin tablet, which brought my blood pressure down because he said it was in dangerous levels, and a steroid shot. He told us to wait 30 minutes until this medication took effect because it was strong. During that period, Mr. Sanderson asked me whether or not I wanted to use the restroom or not. And before we traveled back to the jail, I said yes. And I went to the bathroom to use the bathroom. While I was in the bathroom, I became very reluctant about going back to the Washington Parish jail, going back into that situation. I felt a foreboding about going back. And I made a decision. At that point, I said I wasn't going back to the jail. And when Mr. Sanderson came in and told me it was time to go to the hospital, back to the jail, I hit Mr. Sanderson in the head with the weapon that I traditionally carried. I got his gun and left out of the hospital. And as I left out the hospital, I encountered Officer Stacy Economou, who I didn't know was an officer at the time because she was in a green van that was not marked. But when I recognized that she was an officer, she had gotten out and asked me what was going on in the hospital. I seen the badge and I pointed the weapon at her and told her I wasn't trying to hurt her. I just had to go. And she said she couldn't let me go. At that time, several units pulled in and canvassed the area. And I got behind Miss Economy because I figured I was exposed. I got behind her. And when I got behind her, suddenly she twisted away from me. I had my hand on her weapon at that time. And as she twisted away from me, her gun came free from the holster. I dived into.
Okay. Oh, still there? Okay, and then I have the details of what happened after.
Okay.
I already have them, all right? So tell me, I noticed that you were enrolled. I see your program participation looks like starting in 2017, you got your high set or your GED. You've done Cage Your Age in 2016, Living in Balance 2017, Thinking for Change 2017, Moral Compass 2021, and you have some club participation in various clubs. I also noticed you are enrolled in the Bible College.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
graduated, or you currently a senior?
Yes, ma'am. I am almost finished with the Bible college. The class that I need will not come back for a couple of years, but with that class, I graduate.
Very good. Well, good. Thanks for that hard work. And have you completed victim awareness?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us then what you believe your impact is on Stacy Cockrell, Tommy Sorrow, and the deputy, Mr. Sanders. Your actions. Tell us what impact you have.
I believe my actions that they shattered their confidence. I believe that because it was such an unprovoked act, I believe that it greatly impacted them, probably their family as well, because I know they was concerned with them being in that line of work and having a person come at them at the way that I did. I know that I impacted Mr. Sanderson greatly because he lost his job because of my actions. And you know, I heard the pain and the betrayal that he felt as a result of my actions. As he testified at trial, I had longed to reach out to them, but of course I couldn't because I could never really understand what they went through. But I do know that whatever they went through, they should not have went through it. And I should not have done what I done. I was selfish in what I done. I thought only of myself and my situation. And because of it, I know that all of our lives was greatly affected, but especially theirs because they did nothing but their job. I did everything.
What about their family? You think you had any impact on their family?
Yes, I definitely believe I had an effect on their family. With Mr. Sanderson losing his job, I know that greatly impacted his family. With Miss Economy, I can just imagine that, the damage I did to her property, putting her at risk of losing her life. I know that I caused harm to her family. I know that this is something that probably replayed in their mind years and years after the incident.
Okay. You know, I have some concerns. I see that you have, you know, a history of violent offenses. You've got some good programs. You know, we talked about the incident with the at the local jail after the escape. When you got to Angola, you spent some time in CCR. Was that because of the escape history, or
Yes,
why?
yes, ma'am.
How long did you stay in CCR?
I stayed in the CCR in solitary confinement for 12 years and another year in the CCR dorm at Camp C.
So you've been in general population about 10 years?
Well, more like 8.
8.
Yes, ma'am.
Where
Ma'am.
do you live now?
Where you live now?
Oh, I live now in Walnut 3, the new men's sobriety dormitory.
And I guess your job is full-time student. What is that your job?
I actually have several jobs, but in that dorm, I'm a mentor and a peer support sponsor. I'm also a family council substitute. I work on the outside carpentry crew, and I go to Bible college.
And you've had substance abuse, living in balance,
Yes, ma'am.
only substance abuse education you've had?
I've taken NAAA from Sober Group. I've taken Living in Balance 1 and 2, and you know, that in the new men sobriety program, I've graduated from that. That's how I became a sponsor.
Tell us about if you were to be successful and were granted parole at some point, what's your transition plan?
Well, immediately my transition plan will go to the parole project, where I will participate in the program in there that, you know, learn how to better integrate myself into society successfully, as far as learning computer skills, how to
Yeah, we're familiar with their program. What
Okay.
happens after the parole project? After that.
Beyond that, one of the things that I have identified through the help of my attorney was a NA and AA near parole project and near my home, where I would stay with my wife. That is something that I feel that I need, because I understand that I will always be an addict and I will always need that type of programming. I also have been in contact with First 72 Plus, and they have assured me that they have a family support group that I can join, where I will have other offenders who have successfully reintegrated to communicate with.
What is the Fort Supportive Transitional Home, Chalmette? What is that?
But Chalmette is actually ran by Brother Green. One of the things that they allow you to do is help facilitate within the to my wife, and I wanted to be able to successfully reintegrate myself with my wife, because we never lived together, and they provide me
Right,
stuff.
So that would be parole project and the transitional home in Chalmette, then to the
Yes.
wife that's violent,
Yes, ma'am.
right? And then I saw something about there, and I guess we'll hear from your spiritual advisor. There was another plan, I think, in Portland, Maine.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell her the interstate.
Yes, ma'am. I was attempting to go to Maine when I had my first hearing set, but the interstate compact was denied
Okay. Because you don't have family.
because I didn't have family there.
Okay. Okay, well, I don't really have any other questions. I'll ask the warden if he has any comments. Warden Falgood?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, Robert has participated in programming, and I'll say that the charges greatly impacted his progression from going into trustee status from C to B to A, because of the escape, because of the impact with law enforcement. Despite that, again, very few write-ups, and for us here, have not had any issues with him.
Thank you. So, I note in your record, I just have one more question, Mr. McKee, that you have a good institutional record in terms of write-ups. You've only had 3 write-ups. But I see in 2019, there were 38. Tell us about that. What was that?
Well, that was during the time me and my wife was preparing to get married. She had an uncle who lived at Camp C, and he was very concerned he would not be able to participate in the wedding. So while I was on the phone with my wife, she would routinely bring him onto the call so that I would be the one to explain exactly what was being done to bring him to the main prison. And we didn't
Three-way
know
call. So it was about a 3-way call.
a 3-way call. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right. That's enough information. Ms. Wise has a question.
There was also, good morning. There was also a plan about going to work in Mississippi at the state prison.
Yes, ma'am. I have been offered a job to go work in Mississippi as well. But I feel that right now, me and my wife never had an opportunity to build on our marriage. And I feel that before I can commit to something like that, I at least owe it to her to, try to work on our marriage and build it stronger before I just make a commitment such as that.
Oh, okay, to be a chaplain at, build a chaplain's there, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's definitely something that we have considered and we have discussed, and it's something that may be very viable for me because I would love to have the opportunity to go into that community and help it, being that I was such a destructive force in that community. I would love to have that opportunity.
All right, thank you. That's all I had, Jim.
All right. I don't see any other questions from our colleagues, so we would like to hear from your wife now, Miss Yolanda.
Stand next to him.
Go ahead, Neil. That's okay.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning on behalf of my husband, Robertt Mckee. I'm so sorry. I do have to give reverence to God Almighty for allowing this blessed day to happen. Robin and I became acquainted with one another back in January of 2018, and we were married September 6, 2019. I'm truly blessed to have Robertt as my husband, the love of my life, my soulmate, but most of all, my best friend. Robertt has overcame a lot of obstacles throughout his life, and I'm extremely proud of the man that he is today. As his wife, I'm fully prepared to take responsibility to provide for my husband financially, a home to live in, and transportation to and from work. I am a retired U.S. Navy veteran. I do receive full benefits from the military, and I do have a full-time job. If this board allow Robertt to be released, I know in my heart that Robertt will be the best husband to me, a wonderful father to our children, and a fantastic grandfather to our grandchildren. Robertt would be a great asset to the community by giving back unconditionally, a great mentor to a lot of children, a lot of our family members and friends. I'm fully aware of Robert's past and the person he was over 20 years ago. He is no longer that man any longer. The man that I have grown to love and fall in love with is a totally different person from back then. Our family and friends will forever be grateful if this board will vote for Robert to grant him parole. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Mr. Higgins.
Members of the board, good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of Robert. Partner Pamela and I have traveled here from Maine to be with Robert because we believe him very much. I've known Robert since 2008. I met him through writeaprisoner.com. It was never my intention to become his spiritual advisor or anything. I saw a man that I seemed to recognize when I saw his face online, and I reached out to him as a man, and I treated him as I would any other man in this world. And when Robert first received my letter, he had to think about it a little bit before he responded. He'd never been approached by somebody like me, been treated like somebody like me, as a real human being. And when he did write back, he has told me that it opened his eyes to realize that he could be more than what life expected out of him. He made promises to his mom to finish his education, but in his mind, there was always a ceiling. That meant getting a GED. Through our interaction in the years up until I became a spiritual advisor, he began to see more and more clearly that he was and could be much more than what he thought himself to be. And if you were to look back through the hundreds of letters, listen to the phone calls that we've had, you could almost feel the point of where there was a change inside of him. That, he was a man before all else, and we hear people say that, he's a different man now, but there's always a part of Robert's past that's going to be part of him. But the question is, what that's done to him. And Robert, I've seen, has recognized what he has done, realized what he's done, and that's a part of him, but it affects him differently now. He's more mature. When he talks about how he impacted people, we've had countless discussions on the choices that he made, not only in the crimes that he's done, but in the people in his past that he's felt remorse for, that he wished he'd treated better. It's an astonishing realization to feel that he could do something with those feelings and transform them into something else. And he has a strong desire to take that recognition within himself and his place in the world to help other people, to at-risk youth. He's developed a very comprehensive nonprofit plan that he hopes to implement someday. It's just amazing to me to see. And I have to say that his impact on mine, though I'm his spiritual advisor, I think that role in the past 15 years has been equal. He's helped me through a difficult time of divorce and times of my own life. He was outside of myself, and like we were two parts of one man. We were two prisoners. He was a prisoner of body. I was a prisoner of mind and spirit. And together we have made two men, I think. And I have to say that we have brought him into the lives of many people in our community. And we tried to make a plan for him in Portland, and he developed a rapport with the director at the Friendship House there. He has had a huge impact on all those people. And we have people from across the country that we've introduced him to across the world, really, in New Zealand and Australia, he has impacted their lives. And so I just know that given the chance, he will bring great goodness to this world. And he is so sorry within his heart. I know he is. I've heard the pain. I've felt it. But I think also that's helped to bring him to a better place. And I'm sorry that people had to suffer for that. But he's taken this to heart, and he's taken it to spirit, and he's taken it to the Lord. And we all pray that we give him a chance to be a part of the world, because I think he's reached the limit of what he can do here. He worked so hard here in the prison to improve other people's lives. I think the world deserves to have Robert back with them. So thank you so much for this time. And
Sorry, thank you for traveling such great distance to participate. Here now from Vicki Dane.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you very much for letting me speak today. I'm over in the UK. I'm 41. I've known Robert since 2007 for 15 years. We've communicated with each other regularly across this period by letter, email, videogram. By profession, I'm a qualified clinical psychologist. I also have a past career as a qualified UK lawyer, but today I'm here to speak in a personal capacity in support of Robert's character as his friend. Throughout the 15 years I've known Robert, I've experienced him as a reflective, empathic, generous and humble person, always striving for self-improvement and to share what he has learned with other people. Examples of these character traits that I have seen across the years. Reflectiveness. In my work as a clinical psychologist, I work with people who have experienced adversity while growing up, and I have seen in them positive post-traumatic growth, a result from their being reflective on their experiences. I've also witnessed this same growth in Robert. I've never seen him wallow in self-pity or look to blame others for the situation that he found himself in being incarcerated. Instead, I've always seen him strive to understand how he got into that situation, to work out what he needed to do to make amends, and learn how to make wiser choices in the future. I've seen not just philosophical reflection guided by his faith and relationship with God, but I also saw pragmatic change through the engagement that he made with targeted, relevant prison programs. He's talked about many of those with me over the years. I honestly actually can't keep track of how many there were, but some of them that he mentioned were being particularly proud to get his GED. The trials and tribulations of trying to study to be a paralegal, notably working on his anger management, and really in particular, the strong focus has always been his religious studies and how important that's been to him. I'm aware as well that he's done practical work roles while in the prison community. He mentioned being a barber. He's mentioned some of the other ones today. Again, there's so many I can always keep track. Empathy. Robert has always been a consistently stable, kind, and wise voice to me during my own difficult periods. He's also been there to celebrate and share in the positive times in my life, such as when I had my children. In spite of the obvious differences in our privileges, experiences, and backgrounds, he's always been there for me, and he's understood my own life experiences. I really value his advice and his unwavering emotional support that he's provided me with. Generosity. What I've always seen in Robert is a motivation not just to learn and grow as a person for himself, but also so that he can pass on his learning to others. I've seen him not only make peace with the events that were out of his control that he experienced as a young person that led to where he is today, but also strive to find ways to intervene to help other people, young people, people who've experienced similar challenges that he's been through. He's always been generous in his time and energy to give me. He's always asked about me and called me out when I've just been focusing on him and made sure that there's time for me, and he's invested in my care too. With all of this in mind, it really seems to me it would be such an unnecessary waste of such a valuable potential contribution that Robert could make in terms of supporting other people who have experienced similar challenges if he's not released. He has a wealth of experience, learning, wisdom, energy, and kindness ready to share with others that would make a huge difference for the better. Lastly, I want to state I will always be here to support Robert as a friend in any way that I can, as I believe that what he has got to share with the world is so valuable. If he is released, I am committed to supporting him in the transition process and in the future in any way that I possibly can. I really urge you to grant parole to Robert, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for joining us from the UK. We appreciate it. All right, I think that's all who are speaking in support. Now we'd like to hear from opposition, Ms. Tommy Sorrell.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for having me here. I've been patiently listening and watching. I can tell you that everybody that spoke on Mr. McKay's behalf have only known him since he's been locked up. I can tell you that I've encountered him whenever he was out, when he was free. It's a very different man. The first time that I dealt with him was with the aggravated burglary. I was working the night whenever he did break into the house. And I would like him to maybe explain the drug dealer's mother that was there and what he did to her. He's a very violent man. I responded to the hospital, an officer in need of assistance. Whenever I was pulling up to the hospital, I saw Robertt Mckee running from the front of the hospital. I knew that immediately that he was the reason that I was responding to the call. He wasn't in prison uniform, but it was premeditated. He had brought that weapon with him. He did wear street clothes under his uniform. And whenever he asked the deputy to unshackle him so he could defecate, the deputy trusted him, unshackled him, and he viciously beat him in the head, leaving him on the floor in a pool of blood. What made it even worse is this deputy was elderly, retired from one profession, but working to supplement like his income in an older profession. So he was in his 70s. He was a trusting person. And Mr. McKee, as you can see, is a rather large man. And there was no sense in him beating this man down, this elderly man down, who did lose his career after that because he was scared to death. It did impact his life. Stacy Economou, she was a brand new officer at the time that had been working with me, and I was her field training officer. She actually was across the street in her green van, and she was going to drop a Christmas present off to an employee that worked at the business. As Mr. McKee came running out, I could see the deputy's gun in his hand moving up and down, up and down. He ran straight to Stacy Economou, grabbed hold of her, put the gun to her head, like I could see the muzzle like against her skin. And he was wrestling with her, trying to throw her into the van. And she did tussle with him. Me and another officer had pulled up, and I actually got in front of them with my unit in order to prevent him from taking her. She broke away from him. He, at that point, had her gun, jumped into the van, and tried to run me over with her van. I shot my shotgun into the vehicle. It missed him. It went a little bit high, but I was in the process of running to keep him from running over me. And then he fired several shots at me after he turned and continued. No regard for life. He continued at a very high rate of speed. And then there was a mother with her teenage son that he T-boned, probably going 85 miles an hour. Both of them were severely injured. He continued a few miles down the road until he entered Mississippi. Once he entered Mississippi, the van became disabled due to the crash, and he ran off the road. Well, then he jumped out of the van, continued with the gun in his hand, running. We're chasing him, giving him commands to drop the gun, to stop running. And at that point, there was an elderly couple that was approaching us in their vehicle. Now, this couple probably was 80 years old. We're screaming at them, like, get back, stop, back up. Well, he ran straight toward this vehicle, the gun in his hand, pointed it at both occupants. You could see the fear in their eyes And the only reason that I'm here today and he's here today is because as he was beating against the car with the gun, trying to make them open the vehicle so he could either abduct them or throw them out or carjack him or God only knows what, the gun came out of his hand and we were able to physically take him into custody. Do I think that he needs to be released back on society? Absolutely not. I do appreciate that he's going through rehabilitation, but I don't think he's been there long enough yet. He did try to kill me. He tried to kill Stacy. And thank God he didn't kill the deputy that he beat in the head. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sorrell, for your participation today. We appreciate you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. McKee, before we turn it over to your attorney, is there a statement, a brief statement you'd like to make to the panel?
Yes, ma'am. That day was a horrible day. I made a lot of horrible decisions that day. But the intent to take anyone's life was never my intention. I accept full responsibility for what I done. If I could turn back that clock, I would. But since that moment, since that time in my life, I have worked tirelessly trying to get my life back together, trying to find out what was broken inside of me that would make me make a decision that would impact so many different lives continuously. I could never undo what I done. And no amount of time could ever atone for the harm that I caused. But what I can do is move forward with my life and continue to try to help people with the same intensity that I hurt people, and try to prevent other young men who come from the same type of background I came from making the same bad choices I did. My heart goes out to those officers, Ms. Sorrow. Obviously, I hurt her, and and to hear her, it breaks my heart because I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to get out of a bad situation. I wanted to save my life. And I'm sorry that I had to sacrifice, I had to hurt other people as a result of that. That's all, man.
All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Cameron?
Good. I don't know if it's morning or afternoon, but good, whatever. I'm honored to speak on behalf of Roberrt Mckee today, who's both a friend and a client. Robertt was forced into survival mode at a very young age. He was raised by a single mother who had mental health issues that prevented her from properly being able to care for him. They spent most of his youth living in homeless shelters. In order to survive and take care of his mother, Robertt went to work when he should have been worried about homework, sports, and playing on the playground. Robertt did whatever he could to earn money for himself and his mother, turning to the kids in the neighborhood who taught him how to pickpocket and steal purses. One day, while Robertt was out hustling money, his mother was taken to a hospital after having been raped by two men in the shelter. This incident still affects Robertt to this day. When she was released from the hospital, Emma McKee went to a mental hospital for about 6 months while Robertt remained on the streets, fending for himself at only 13 years old. He figured out he could make easy money selling drugs and began doing so in addition to stealing from others to pay his mother's medical bills. He actually felt like a success when he was able to pay rent for an apartment where he and his mother stayed until he was sent to Parchman Prison in Mississippi at just the age of 16. He spent 7 years in the Mississippi prison system, enduring things that most of us don't even want to think about. But he learned how to survive there too. He learned how to navigate that system, but was still always on guard in case things went wrong. When he left the Mississippi system, he had not had a chance to grow. He recognizes that he was still that 16-year-old boy he had been when he arrived. In 2001, he was picked up and charged with robbing someone. Little did he know that the person he robbed was related to both guards and inmates within the jail. Those relationships caused Robert serious hardships that triggered his need to survive again. It was that survival mode that led to the terrible decisions he made on December 29, 2001. In Robert's mind at that moment in the hospital, he knew he could not go back to that jail and that he had to survive. Every decision he made that day was rooted in that survival instinct. He knew he had been relatively safe in Mississippi and was focused on getting back there. I say relatively safe because that safety is probably not something you or I would call safe, but it's what Robert knew. He just wanted to get back to Mississippi. He wanted to live. As a result of the decisions that day, he was put into solitary confinement here in Angola, where he would remain locked up in a cell by himself for 13 years until 2016. A cell, alone, limited interaction with others, where he could finally breathe and not worry about making money or protecting his mother. Although Robert doesn't look back on his time in solitary very fondly, being alone in a place where he could lay his head and not worry about what was coming next gave him the space to figure out who he was and who he wanted to be. For the first time in his life, he could stop fighting, be still, and reflect on the man he had become. In 2007, earlier in that incarceration in solitary, Robert had a very frank discussion with his mom. And as moms will do, she made sure that Robert knew how much she loved him and reminded him that she had always believed in him. She told Robert he could do and become anything he set his mind to, and made him promise that no matter what happened in his life, he would get an education. Tragically, Robert lost his mother just a week later. For Robert, that conversation with his mother became a catalyst for change. He began thinking about who he was and realized he needed to change because he didn't like what he saw. He quickly began advocating for himself to get access to the little bit of programming offered in the cell blocks. He wanted to use the system to prosper and develop his character. And that is exactly what he has done. He became engaged in the only programming available to him, which was church. And when the preacher who had been coming to the cell block stopped showing up, Robert fought for his ability to attend services. For 9 years, Robert wrote letters to the powers that be, trying to get himself released from the cell blocks. He had been a model prisoner throughout that time with only a single write-up. He told the wardens and even Jimmy LeBlanc that he would do right and be a better person if they would just let him into general population so he could begin his education. As soon as he was released from solitary, he began taking those classes and finding ways to improve himself and his future. At the time, he was facing 65 years in prison with no possibility of parole, but it didn't matter. He was focused on his education and fulfilling that promise he made to his mother. He became a legal assistant in the law library, fighting for both himself and others. He takes great pride in his legal work that he does on behalf of others and has been instrumental in assisting many people in their ability to leave this facility, even while he was stuck with no way out himself. He's a passionate advocate for others and can often be found preparing people for their pardon and parole hearings or preparing legal work for court. He thinks of others before himself, which is apparent in his work both as a substance abuse mentor in the New Men Addiction Ministry sobriety dorm, and the fact that he's written some of their curriculums. As you can see from his packet, he's been really busy since 2016. He's completed all the required courses the board prefers. He knew what he needed to be done and he did it. The difference is that when Robert was young, he was reacting to the circumstances forced upon him, whereas now he's creating circumstances through his own actions. The Robert that sits before the board today is an example of redemption and rehabilitation. as a result of his own actions and his intent to maximize the use of the programming offered to him. He sought out educational programs and effected change in his own life, and he continues to do so even today. He told you he's only one math class short of getting his bachelor's degree from the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. And just since he was supposed to be in front of this board in August, he's earned his trustee status, become a part of the outside carpentry crew, and completed the victim awareness class. He has a network of family support ready to assist him in his reentry. Y'all heard from all of them today, Miss Yolanda, Mr. Ted, whose life Robert affected in such a profound way that he's been coming up here for over a decade. And all of his family are able and willing to support him in any way he needs when he goes home, and will provide a stable environment for him where he will never have to worry about surviving again. As he told the board today, he's got a solid employment plan and a transition program. He actually chose the transition program where he would go through the two different programs so that he and his wife had time to go through couples counseling and build their relationship so it will last the solid foundation that will last the test of time. Ultimately, Robert plans to use his story and what he's learned during incarceration to make a difference in the lives of children who are suffering from the same home life he was years ago. He wants to intervene in the lives of those children so they aren't forced to endure the things he did and end up on the wrong path like he did. Roberrt Mckee survived the trials and tribulations of his youth, has thrived during his time here in Angola, and will use those experiences as his testimony if this board grants him the opportunity for release. We humbly ask that you find that the work that Robert has done throughout his incarceration here at Angola demonstrates both growth and redemption, showing that he's ready and able to be a successful, contributing member of society, and that you vote to grant him parole today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. McKee, I think we're prepared to vote, and I'll be voting first. Your case was assigned to me. I reflect and I've listened to Ms. Sorrell, and she didn't tell you she suffered for years after the incident that happened to her and her fellow officers. The other victim, who is also one of the other victims, who's also imposed, really lost a lot as well, suffered post-traumatic stress syndrome. It impacted her children, her marriage dissolved as a result of it, and that's profound. Mr. Sanderson's family is opposed, and he's deceased now, but his family is very strongly opposed because it affected the rest of the family. So your case is difficult, although I've listened very carefully to all the things that your attorney has said on your behalf, your wife and the things that she said, Mr. Higgins, and your visitor from the Miss Dane from the United Kingdom. I've listened very carefully. And what I noticed is, I asked you the question I asked you about CCRs because I know what that means, being locked up in CCR and how long, and then where did you go after that? I had reasons to ask you those questions, and I note that you did go to work when you got out of CCR, and you have applied yourself. You engaged in activities that help others. You're a little too wordy today. I wasn't really pleased with some of your responses that you gave me, but I understand the situation you're in today. But I'm impressed with the service you've done for others and where you've come. I'm willing to take a chance on you. My vote would be to grant you parole. Now, it does require unanimous vote today. If you were granted, I would add special conditions. You have absolutely no contact with the victims, any of the victims or their families, that you do complete your degree, and that you do enroll in and complete the couples counseling, and that you perform community service work, working with at-risk youth. 4 hours a month. I'm just one vote, but that's my vote. Mrs. Wise?
Mr. McKee, I've really been back and forth. I've listened intently as well. I didn't realize that the officer was elderly. So you didn't need that much violence.
Yes, ma'am.
You just ran away, you know. Once your shackles was loose, you know, you didn't need that violence. And I'm wrestling with that. So, looking at who you are today and how you presented today and the community that you created, it bears for me to take a chance on you as well. My vote is to grant. You do have a good institutional record. You have good club interactions, and again, the community that you built around yourself. And I concur with the special conditions that's been set forth with the added special condition of random drug screens by probation and parole.
Supreme?
I do too find myself struggling. You know, it definitely was premeditated. You had the weapon, you had your clothes on. But then you went through 12 years in solitary confinement and came out and jumped right back into all the programs and done pretty much anything and everything we could ask. So today I'm also going to grant, but I'm going to add the condition that you be placed on electronic monitoring and that you stay away from the victim.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Jackson?
All right, Mr. McKee, this is a hard case because of the facts of what happened in this case. But if that's the only thing we ever decide a case on, nobody would ever plead. What we do is look at what you've accomplished for yourself, but also what you've accomplished for others. I can't imagine 12 years in solitary confinement. And yet that didn't break you, it motivated you, it gave you the opportunity to assess yourself. And then when you got out with a mindset that you wanted to right your wrong. I appreciated the fact you fully acknowledged your actions and the fact that you really have given reflection to the harm you caused your victim, because I thought your responses to that were very thoughtful. You have only 3 write-ups in the time that you served. And not only have you worked on yourself, but you have worked at levels. And that speaks volumes to me about the man you are today, as opposed to the person that you were 21 years ago. So for me, I think you've done everything that you could possibly do. There's nothing more that you can accomplish. And so my vote today was to grant parole.
Mr. Roach?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Mr. McGee.
Good morning, sir.
Mr. McGee, I agree with everything all 4 of my colleagues have said. This is a very difficult case. This is a very difficult case. And what you have to understand, Mr. McGee, my role on the Committee on Parole is different from all the other members. I am the victim's advocate. I am the victim's advocate. And we must keep the victims of this crime within this process. There are 3 reasons that I think the state of Louisiana incarcerates an individual. First reason is isolation. They want to isolate that individual because of his negative behavior. The second reason is to rehabilitate this individual. So when he comes out, that he will be a productive member of society. I don't think there's any need to isolate you anymore, simply because I think you've been rehabilitated. You have a history of violence. And that violence has kept you in trouble most of your adult life. You have a long, high history of criminal activity, and most of that is of violent nature. You have 2 felony convictions in the state of Mississippi. But I don't think we need to isolate you anymore. I don't think we can rehabilitate you any more than you are. But when it comes to the third reason that we incarcerate an individual, and that's retribution. Retribution for your crime. You have a 65-year sentence. And basically, I think it was a fair sentence. You have not served 1/3 of that sentence. You served 21 years. And that's not even 1/3 of your sentence. You have victims who are still physically, mentally, and emotionally affected by crimes that you perpetrated. Premeditatedly and deliberately beat an old man, held a police officer at gunpoint, accosted her, stole an automobile, and erratically drove cities of Louisiana and Mississippi. Based upon insufficient time served for a premeditated and deliberate violent act against law enforcement, a history of violence, the entire legal community, the judge, the DA's office, the sheriff's office, and the chief of police are adamantly opposed, and you have multiple victims adamantly opposed to your release. I deny your request.
All right, Mr. McKee, as I explained when we started, yours does require a unanimous vote. So you received 4 favorable votes, but 1 vote to deny parole. So today, your parole's been denied, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, let's unpack this. Mr. Roche. I didn't realize that he had a specific role as a victim's advocate. I didn't know that was like a specific role that he held. Anyone recognize his attorney? We've seen her in a few cases. She actually married she married an inmate that recently received a life commutation. Yeah, a lot of firsts here. I don't think we've ever had anyone with a spiritual advisor and a therapist who traveled in or took calls from overseas. This can definitely be a special for the Mandu overseas family, both our Aussies and our Brits. So how do you feel about this? I think Mr. O'Shea was right. I was surprised how lenient all of the board members were being. I was also surprised that the prosecutor was not here. This is typically a case a prosecutor would show up to, being what he did. So the first mistake was, don't go to a different state and rob a drug dealer. Man, I tried finding stories on it, news articles. I only have one article that talks about the crime of his escape, but not about that robbery. He messed with the wrong dude, and I don't know what he did to his mother, to the drug dealer's mother. What Tommy Sorelli had said. Why don't you ask him? But I'm guessing it wasn't anything good. So he goes into the house. He tries to rob the drug dealer. He, I guess, assumes he'll get away with it because who would report it or something. I don't know. But he robbed the wrong guy, gets locked up, ends up in a jail where it's his relatives, and they basically give him, they give him hell, right? So he's locked up in a jail by people who are basically out to torment him, and I am sure his existence was terrifying, was short of hell, just completely horrific. He devises a plan to escape, which I guess you can't blame him under circumstances. But where it stops is that it was a 70-year-old police officer. He was unshackled, and I think, was it Miss Jackson? Like she said, you could have ran away. Instead, he beat him and left him in a pile of blood. And you just can't, like, why? That's a lot of anger and rage, and it just seems so pointless. So pointless. Then he runs down. It happens to be an unmarked cop car. This is, I can read from the article, but it was also described pretty much perfectly from the police officer. Was it Tommy? So he runs down. There's a rookie cop in an unmarked car. He points his gun at her. Somehow, she's terrified. So he takes her gun. He steals her van. He goes on a crazy escape. There are cops right behind him. He really didn't think this thing out at all. He then T-bones a car, seriously hurts the young driver of that car. He gets into the next state. His car breaks down. He gets out. He then tries to steal a car from an elderly couple in their 80s. And he drops his gun, banging on the glass, and then they're able to tackle him. If he had just escaped without doing all of that harm, he himself wouldn't, I don't think we'd be here today, or at least the outcome would have been very different. Imagine what his life was like when they sent him back to that jail. Wow. And then they put him in 12 years solitary confinement, that is terrifying. And I do hear that aspect of, like, that, I wouldn't wish that, I think, on anyone. 12 years solitary is a form of torture, and I do think it's absolutely incredible that he did get out and do what he's done now in terms of out of solitary, and that it didn't break him, and that he's been able to, like, have a good head on his shoulders, and that's just remarkable. That really is. He didn't just serve time, he served 12 years in solitary. That is absolutely incredible how he didn't lose his mind. I think so, at least. I didn't think he interviewed it well either, though. I thought it was very unimpressive. And then there was something that he said when he on his speech that it was like a slip. I think he said, and this was the last thing he said before. So he said, I wanted to save my life. Sorry, I had to sacrifice. And then he like said, hurt. And that's, I mean, he used the word sacrifice. Like he actually feels like they were a sacrifice so he could escape. Like that's scary that he would, even at this point, 21 years later, on his parole hearing, have a slip up like that where he would use the words, sorry, I had to sacrifice, hurt those people. That's scary. You know, you don't sacrifice innocent people because you're afraid for your life. It's just, there's something really wrong with that thinking. And to say it even now, I think is a red flag here. I thought the police officer, Tommy Sorrell, was that her last name? I thought she spoke great. She really did. That was like a really, really solid victim statement. The spiritual advisor and the therapist, not impressed at all. I don't know why the board let them just go on and on and on. Sometimes I just wonder, you know, I've seen the board cut off victims like few minutes into them, kind of sometimes spilling out their life, their soul, and then they'll let like someone like a spiritual advisor go on this like 5-minute, 6-minute like monologue of word salad, what sounded like to me, really. I mean, he flew all the way here, man. That's a lot, and they invest so much time, and you know, on one hand, I think it's very honorable and a selfless thing to do to go and invest so much time into a complete stranger and to try to help them. I'm not going to judge that. But I just wasn't impressed by what they had to say. Maybe I'm being too hard on them. When all the voting happened, I thought he was going to get let out, but Mr. O'Shea, he is the toughest one in the House, and he's showing that time and time again. He will lay down the law, and I think he has a really good point. 21 years on a 65-year sentence. He's going to probably end up getting out. You know, I don't know when he's going to get his next chance, but probably my guess is when he hits the 25-year mark, he will get out. Love to hear your thoughts on this. I'll put the links in the description down below to the article I found. And with that, I'll let you go.